You're welcome to Law and Property with Dr. Prince Joel, your real estate investment coach. On this channel, you will be learning everything you need to know about real estate transactions, investments, due diligence, documentation, and property management. If these interest you, then consider subscribing. Click on the button below and subscribe so that the next time I post any video, you will be notified. Today, we will be discussing the obligations and rights of a tenant. Just as the landlord has his own rights, so does the tenant has his own rights. But interesting enough, the tenant has more rights than the landlord. The tenant is more protected than the landlord. Before we go into talking about the obligations and rights of a tenant, let me give you a tip. Do you know that you can actually sue your landlord? In fact, you can jail him. Watch till the end to know how possible it is. Now, let's get into the obligations and rights. Number one, right to receive receipt of payments. It is your right as a tenant to receive a receipt of payment upon payment of rent. 2, right to peaceful enjoyment of the property that you have rented. A landlord has no right to disturb your peace. Once you have rented that apartment, you have a right to enjoy all the peace that you can find in it. The idea of a landlord coming in the night to knock on your door or coming in between time to disturb you is prohibited by the law. Number 3, right to notice to quit. It is your right to receive a notice to quit before you are evicted from the premises. Number 4, right not to be evicted without a lawful order of court. For you to be thrown away, evicted from that property, the landlord need to serve you a court order. You need that order from the court for your property to be thrown out. Number 5, right to pay your rent when due. Not when it has expired. Not in arrears, when it is due. Of course, the next question will be, when is the rent due? If you paid your rent 1st of January, you commenced your tenancy, as in you started your occupation in that property on the 1st of January, means that you paid your rent on the 1st of January or before 1st of January. So, your rent is expected to be due Eve to January, a day before 1st, a week before 1st. Anything after January, it's already in arrears. Instead of paying January, you pay February, March, April. It's already in arrears. So, rent must be paid when due. 6, right to a habitable premises. The tenant has a right to dwell, live in a habitable, livable home. It is wrong for a landlord to give a tenant a house that does not have roof, is leaking, or a house that the windows are not functioning. The house must be habitable. It's the right of the tenant. 7, a right to pay charges, rates as prescribed by law. It is the obligation and the right of the tenant to pay those bills that are stipulated. For example, utility bills, your NEPA bill, your security bills, your water bills. 8, the tenant has the obligation to keep the premises in a good and tenantable repair. Of course, wear and tear expected. It simply means that the tenant must keep that property in good shape. In keeping it in good shape, do not also forget that a property that has stayed long will also have that effect, and that is where the wear and tear come in. When a property is old, it's old, but it is the duty and obligation of the tenant to keep that property in order. This simply means that the tenant must keep the house in a good condition, repair the things that are bad, and keep it in a perfect order. However, for a house that is old, that is where the wear and tear come in. You don't expect the tenant to be liable. So when a house is old, that's where the wear and tear come in. 9, the tenant must allow the landlord or his agent access into the property to inspect the property. Now, the landlord does not need to take the tenant by surprise. Adequate notice is necessary. A landlord that wants to inspect the property should not come in the morning and say he wants to inspect the property that same day. No. Notice is required. Adequate notice. 1 week, 2 weeks, days notice before inspection. 10. The tenant shall not redecorate, redesign, or make any alteration to the property without the consent of the landlord. Now, a lot of people will move into a property and they will use wallpaper. It is wrong if you did not seek the consent of the landlord. A lot of people will move into property and they will break the wall to install window AC or whatever they call it. It is wrong. For you to do that, you need to seek the consent of the landlord. A lot of people will move into a property and they will redecorate, move a whole lot of things upside down, break the wall, block all that they need to block. It is wrong if you do it without the consent of the landlord. You need the consent of the landlord to make any alteration, redesign in whichever form. 11. The tenant shall not sublet or lease any part of the premises without the express consent of the landlord. It's very common to see people rent an apartment and before they move out of the apartment, they give it to another person. It is wrong for you to sublet or lease or hand over your property to another person. You need the consent of the landlord. And finally, it is the obligation of the tenant to notify the landlord of any structural defect or damage that occurs in the property. Immediately you notice any structural major defect problem on the property that you occupy, to notify your landlord. Do not be in a hurry to start to repair, because if you repair, the landlord will not pay you. So notify the landlord immediately you notice either the roof is leaking, the foundation of the house is shaking, the door, the window, major part of the building. Notify the landlord before you start repair. And very important, you also need his consent before you start any repair. Otherwise, allow the landlord to come and repair any of these damages. Now let's get back to the question. How can a tenant sue a landlord? A tenant can sue a landlord if any of the rights of the tenant are violated. Once those rights are violated, the tenant can sue the landlord. And once the tenant sues the landlord, the tenant can get judgment against the landlord. However, it pays to be at peace with your landlord. In fact, you will live longer if you're at peace with your landlord. Connect with me. You'll find my details on the screen. Do say hi and I'll respond. I remain your real estate investment coach, Dr. Prince Joel. Till I come your way next time.